being formulated for a communications campaign ahead.
Great. So hello everybody. So I'm Catherine Griffin and I'm Interim Director of Communications in the Arts Council. I'm just emphasising the interim because we're actually in the process of hiring a permanent communications director, which I'm helping the Arts Council do. So there will be somebody new picking this up for me, and if you see somebody new coming in, I don't want you to be going, oh my God, what happened to Catherine? Did she get fired? I didn't, it's fine. I'll just be finishing up my contract in about in a month or two. I'm here this afternoon to just talk you through our current plans for an awareness campaign around re-engaging audiences with live performance. And it's always good to start with the why. And the why this campaign is because it's something we've been watching. Obviously, the Arts Council has been watching arts audiences very, very carefully since the start of COVID, as things came back and then shut down again and came back. And I know you yourselves have all been looking at this with a particularly eagle eye. So we obviously take feedback all the time, but we also want to back up feedback with research. So we saw the kind of first signs of some potential holdouts with behaviour and attitudes research done by the Arts Council. Now that survey was done in October last year, so we kind of said, okay, well, things were very uncertain then, so we don't want to stake everything on that, we'll keep watching. And then as we kind of everything opened up at the beginning of this year, the feedback was coming back strongly that things were not right, that there was still a lot of variation in audiences. Which is why Theatre Forum very brilliantly have been working with Indigo and did a follow-up piece of research very much focused in on your audiences to say, what's happening here? What are the behaviours we're seeing? Are people coming back? If not, why not? And but also importantly, what are the positive drivers? Out of that, I think there were kind of two main kind of groups of audiences. One is really about health-related reasons, and this resistance there, I don't want to come back for real health reasons, and also just levels of anxiety, and that's something that we're not going to do anything with in the communications campaign, so that's something we can't change. But we also saw indications of people having fallen out of the habit, just have fallen into the habit of staying in more, watching TV, or some people had kind of maybe embraced the outdoors a little bit more. So what we want to do is to drive a communications campaign to remind people why attending the theatre, attending a venue, attending live performance in particular is exciting and a great thing to do. So this is a campaign with a very kind of positive kind of focus and a very clear call to action. Come back to live performance. So this is briefly kind of the overview of the campaign brief. And it's to raise awareness of an interest in attending live performance. And when you see, I'm going to show you an early version of the creative. And the Arts Council went to work with our own design agency and brought in a copywriter as well to work on this. And when they came back with the options, we saw they'd really grasped this. This isn't a campaign that's promoting a particular venue. It's certainly not a campaign that's promoting the Arts Council. It really is a campaign promoting that concept of coming back to live performance. In terms of who it is, I mean, really we have a big audience out there, and luckily we have managed to secure a good media budget for this, for a national buy, which we need, because this is a big audience. You're talking about 83% of the adult population in terms of people who have engaged. But then within that, you all know there's that group of people who come to a lot of shows, and they're also regular arts attenders, and they're a lot of the bread and butter of your shows, and that's probably 10% of the bigger group. So in terms of what we asked our creative agency to do and what we're trying to deliver is that big idea. And I wanted to invest in this creative because I don't want this to be creative just for this campaign. I want it to be something the Arts Council can use again and again. So we're really investing in a strong idea. And then secondly, so we're looking at two levels of marketing communications materials. We're looking at materials that can be used at a national level. So we're doing radio ads and print ads and digital ads, so that's primarily what we're looking at. And then we want to deliver materials to you that can be customized for your own messages. So whether that's a banner or a frame with the key campaign concept that you can overlay onto your own materials, or whether that's posters with the kind of key concept of the campaign, or decals that you can put around your venue that just supports that overall message. So briefly, like, I don't have timings for the media buy because we're just going through procurement trying to get the media agency on board. So it's what we're aiming for is to do a big buy in November. I would be interested in some feedback here because we have a good budget. I'm interested in feedback about the pros and cons of investing a lot in November and doing one big push, or investing slightly less in November and keeping some back for January, because I know January is another really big kind of turning point, or it's kind of an inflection point for people to engage with the arts. So I don't know, maybe do a show of hands. So first of all in November, and then second, split between November and January. Okay. Good to know. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the media agency to come back with both options, so that we can look at it as well. But it's really good to have your feedback as well, because this is about supporting you. So what we want to do is then we want to do a major media buy, which we'll be telling you all about, so you'll know fully when those dates are happening. And then you can input that into your own marketing plans as well. So we'll be delivering materials to you that you can use within your own marketing plans there. The next slide I'm nervous about because it's creative, which isn't finished. And I always cringe a little bit when I'm presenting something that's not totally finalised. So please don't judge it too harshly. We've gone back with loads of feedback, but it's kind of the concept that we're kind of aligning around. So draft. So as a concept, the goal that we're going with is the feeling of a live performance can be almost palpable. So it's listing the vast array of feelings and emotions to aims to evoke the nostalgic memories of live performance. So it's like a stream of consciousness idea, and it can work kind of in 3 different ways. And just hold on the localized one, there's big changes there, so don't jump into that. But it can work with a more stripped down version, and so having some very strong kind of concepts, bit of humour, tying into humour, tying into emotion. What does that live experience mean to you? So again, really kind of emotive. And then it can also work as kind of a longer stream of consciousness piece, and they gave us some kind of good versions of this working on buses as well, which was quite nice. And then the third iteration is their first run at localising this for art centres and venues. Now, when I road tested this just with a small group of people, one of the bits of feedback was that this was too overwhelming, and that people might like their own art centre and venue branding to come through more strongly. So what I've gone back and asked them to do is to think of this as a frame or a banner that you can overlook, so that you can overlay onto your material. So again, I'm interested in feedback. Does that make sense? Are you kind of happy to go with that general direction? Because I know obviously all your areas have really strong brand identity in your community, and it's really important that people connect the two. So that's general kind of first draft of creative. We've gone back with lots of different feedbacks in terms of wording, in terms of colours, in terms of like font. So, but it's generally the direction we're going in. So next steps, we will announce the media buy dates once we've got the agency secured. We'll be finalising creative, so they'll be coming back with second round of options around that concept. We'll be finalising the list of materials, so we'll be looking to give you things in your most kind of frequently used formats. So whether that's kind of your brochures like leaflets, or posters. We're also thinking about the idea of a decal, so we're thinking about kind of things that could have a lifespan within the venue. And I know that kind of paper posters, if they're up for too long, maybe they kind of they start to look a bit ratty, and decals can maybe keep their look a little bit longer. But again, very, very happy to take feedback on the types of materials that you'd like to get. Because you all have very different places, and I haven't been to all of them, and I know they all have their own kind of needs. And then once we have that done, we'll also be distributing creative. So as I brought this to council for approval, so because I've asked for quite a much bigger budget for the national campaign. They came back with a few asks, which I wanted to bring back to you guys. They're asks, they're suggestions, you know, but one of the pieces is around accessibility. So this is where I guess the tension between a marketing campaign and our need to focus on all the whole arts audience comes into play. The goal of this campaign is to really engage with people who have already been coming to the theatre. So we're not necessarily trying to get into new audiences. And in some ways that excludes people. There was a point made going, are we excluding people with health issues who can't come back to the theatre? Is there, you know, a certain level of ableism, or are we kind of, is there a need to kind of more highly kind of prioritise accessibility? And so I'm kind of balancing that, going, how do I make sure I still have an effective communications campaign, but we're not excluding parts of the audience? So I feel some of the ways we can do that is to provide choices. You know, I think accessibility is all about providing meaningful choices. So I wonder, does this come back to our messaging, like within individual venues, that yes, we want you to come back to the centre, but there are always other options, you know, whether it's special performances or it's online activities. So that would just be something that we might come back with something more specific around, but it's something we'd like everyone to bear in mind, that the communications campaign, we're aware, is focused on a particular part of our audience, and we don't, as the Arts Council, we want to make sure we're not excluding parts of our audience. The second one, and I think this was raised at a marketing forum before, was the idea of potentially like having a national discount day, like Fiver Fridays or something. And just interestingly, somebody in council raised this as well, said, is there anything venues and theatres would be interested in doing, like a kind of nationwide, a national kind of campaign or initiative to support this. So again, I just wanted to bring that back. It's very much kind of up to this group as to whether you want to pick that up, but that was a suggestion that came back. And then the last thing is, I've been asked to just make sure we do some audience message testing. So just to make sure that the messages we're going out resonate well with our audiences. So if there's anyone who would like to volunteer their venue to work with their own audience, that would be absolutely brilliant. So.
Thank you. Does anybody want to come in on any of those questions that Catherine has raised at this stage? Or
questions, feedback, you know, I'm like absolutely delighted to take feedback as well.
Vernon?
Yeah, just to thank you for your work, and we're looking forward to its follow-through and implementation. The only comment I'd make would be I'd be wary of the discounting. It's just an area we've fought for 2.5 years to no number of audiences, and we wouldn't see that as the optimum way of doing it.
Good, yeah, no, it's good feedback. Some of these are suggestions that sometimes come up at council, and
but I think the principle that Heather and Katie were talking with the marketing forum group, it was around, if somebody buys a ticket, incentivising them to buy a second ticket and attend a second time is a really good way of leveraging somebody who's willing to buy the first ticket in the first place, but not to discount, because the discount just tends to cost you money. Yeah.
Do you think you're not on the mic speaking to this?
Yeah. Anybody else?
My brain is trying to figure out how to process this. In terms of accessibility, I'm new here, so my questions are always coming from having not really done any work here. But is there, through the Arts Council, is there support with Arts Council in having specific accessibility nights, like having signed performances, having audio described performances, having maybe different abilities nights for people who are neurodivergent or have different abilities can come, having masked performances for those who have to be cautious with COVID still, things like that, that the council can do to help support and have that be part of a campaign for the people who are avoiding it for health reasons, of having specific accessible performances. That's sort of what my brain is trying to process right now.
No, that's a great question, and I think, look, on a macro level,
Yeah.
the Arts Council is very, very supportive around accessibility. We have Suha, who's head of EDI, and we've got a policy in place, and we are really working to roll out a lot of actions around that. I will admit to not being familiar enough with the funding setup to know is there a specific funding piece of funding, but is it an initiative that could be rolled out alongside of this? Yeah, I'll certainly look into it. I certainly can ask scientific people.
Thank you. Anybody else before we, Heather, sorry.
I think you've hit the first accessibility thing, which is that language is so accessible, it's everyday. Non-arts speak, let's just not really. And looking at that list of words in the longer ad, I've just done a whole load of focus groups of various organisations, and those are the words that I'm hearing audiences say. So, hallelujah.
Okay, good to know.
Thanks, Heather. Thank you, Catherine.
Great.
And as I say, I know you're under time pressure, so we're particularly appreciative of you taking the time to join us today. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's always lovely to get to come out and meet everyone.
As we do the changeover, I think we're looking for Katie and Heather to return to the. Thanks, Catherine. You don't want the mic. Will I leave it? I should.
Sorry, I'm going deaf, you know? It's really interesting. I noticed last night that I am definitely going deaf. It's very unnerving. Yeah. Oh, hello.
Just as we get set up, this is the first in-person marketing forum, and we're really delighted to see you here in person as opposed to on a screen. We've had too much maybe of screens for too long over the last few months. A lot of the marketing forum presentations and discussions from Katie and Heather with TicketSolve have taken place online. So, and there are people who are joining us today online as well. But this afternoon's, the Missing Audiences survey highlighted a lot of things, but this afternoon's focus after the GDPR session of this morning is about developing new audiences. So Heather and Katie, joined by Carla, will give us their take on developing new audiences. So it harks back to the first discussion of the audience survey data that the Missing Audiences survey from Indigo gave us all those months ago, and hopefully sets the path for the future and audience development in the future. So thank you to you all in advance, because we really do appreciate everything that you've done to support people through the last few months. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Anna. Actually, haven't we really enjoyed this?
We really have. We shouldn't say that, should we? But we have.
No, because as a sector, you're all working together so effectively, and you're all supporting each other, and you're all identifying problems that you have together, challenges that you have together, but you're also really effective at thinking through the differences and what really matters to your own organisation. So it's been brilliant.
It's been great. And some of the
Absolutely.
stuff people have already done.
I
And it's made
know.
a difference. That just makes my heart sing, because I do a lot of research and sometimes it just feels like it goes into a black hole.
Yeah.
So it's brilliant when people act on it.
So let's put this into context. So do you remember the very, very, very first thing we did was Katie presented Missing Audiences, and we looked at this as a framework for what we do next, and we've kind of, you know, done that first box. So we've got this box that's about getting them back, and we've kind of identified all sorts of issues with that around visibility, around people losing the habit of going, and this issue of our core audience saying that they're going to go less frequently and maybe actually not even come back at all. So there were some really key issues to look at. And I think we were very keen in that first session, weren't we, Katie, that we tackled the easier thing first, which was, if we don't get our audience back, then we've got this huge hole to fill. And boy, oh boy, were there missing audiences, because and it's just been brilliant to see people tackling those things and making a big difference to their audiences. And then we kind of looked at these two new boxes, so encouraging risk-taking by our existing audiences. And then we've got this idea of the existing product to new people, and that's two kinds of new people, really. It's the people who are like the ones we've got already, which is our low-hanging fruit, and also broadening audiences, which is a bit more challenging, requires a bit more focus. But we know from all the work we've done in the past with you how brilliant you are at engaging new audiences. So you already tackle this year on year on year. So maybe actually this idea of broadening audiences is really something we can grab hold of and run with. And then finally, in that top right-hand box, we've got this idea of completely changing what we do and attracting completely new audiences. And Katie very sensibly pointed out that if we're looking at time and cost, that box in the top right corner is the most costly in terms of time and also potentially money as well, because it requires people to do that kind of connection.
Could I just chip in there, Heather,
Yes.
and say that we're not suggesting that as an organisation you put yourself into one of these boxes. We're suggesting that you might do a different balance of work across all four boxes. And what is the right balance for one organisation may not be the right balance for another organisation. So it's not prescriptive in that way. It's a tool to help you make those decisions. So I don't want you to think that if you were previously feeling like most of what you did was in the bottom left-hand box, that suddenly you have to stop doing all of that and move into the top right-hand box. It's really about working out what you do and where it fits. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. And also it's a tool to help you see where you need to do a bit more work, you know, don't stop doing things, but actually there may be something that your understanding of your audience signals that you may be needing to focus a bit more on. So we are going to explore these boxes with two case studies. So in the second half of this session, Katie is going to present her research into the attitudes of UK audiences towards the role of cultural organisations in terms of tackling the climate emergency. And okay, it's UK audiences, but I've looked at it and I've been having all sorts of light bulbs going off about the relevance over here as well. And in fact, I think that Irish people are actually a bit more savvy than perhaps a lot of the UK audiences that I come across. So I think it's going to be really important. And actually, does this research provide an opportunity for you as Irish arts organisations, and if so, where do we go from here? That's the purpose of that session. But first, here's Carla. Carla's from This Is Pop Baby, and she's the producer. And I just want you to imagine discovering that you're going to be selling 10 performances in a large-scale sports venue. And that's what you did. And I think it's interesting because it's a very specific product, isn't it, what This Is Pop Baby does. But what I'm really interested in is the thought process that you went through, because we had a really good chat about this. And actually it's the thoughtfulness and the care with which you plan what you do that I think we can all learn from me included. So, I mean, you know, we've got to ask the question, sports venue, okay, heavy metal and drag shows as well, but why a sports venue?
It wasn't so much the sports venue as it for want of other venues in Dublin of a certain size. To a degree, and I will say the National Stadium, the world's first and only purpose-built amateur boxing stadium, is now one of my favourite buildings in Dublin. And they do, if you look at their website, they have a, like extraordinarily eclectic lineup. The Wolf Tones play there, metal bands play there. They have an evangelical church on Sundays. Drag shows happen there. Sneaker conventions there happen there, and our giant theatrical cabaret happen there for 10 nights as well. So it's a great flexible space, you know, for a gigs. They house 2,000 people standing. We brought that space in, and they can host 3 aerial rigging points, which was a very important one for our show. But it's quite versatile. We built a second stage in the middle. We could really bring the walls in so that it was a space that could house such a big thing, but also wasn't too exposing in terms of capacity. You know, we have done similar shows before in places like Vicar Street, which is fab, but is really expensive to rent, and with the kind of a brand new product, we wanted like a slightly smaller capacity for something like that, because while we were hoping it was going to be a massive hit, we didn't actually know that yet. So selling 10 smaller shows rather than 5, absolutely enormous
2,000
ones.
seater, yeah. Wow, sorry, it's standing, isn't it? 2,000 standing, yeah. Was there anything about where it is, location-wise?
Well, it does happen to be within 15 minutes walking distance of almost all of the company members, which is just a total coincidence and a bonus. But we also were aware that we were working against it in terms of being like a bit of an unorthodox or unusual venue for theatre and the arts. It is that little bit outside of the city centre. While people do go to all sorts of gigs there, and they've kind of increased their output of gigs in recent years, we were aware of being a little bit off the map, and particularly in the context of the Dublin Fringe Festival. You know, you can run from project to smock to anywhere else within kind of 10 or 15 minutes, where this, you know, involves getting on a bike or getting on a bus. So that was always going to be part of our campaign in terms of awareness raising around the venue as to where it is, how to get there, and what's on. Because actually the building itself, the main landmarks around it are a giant Hertz car rental sign on one side and a mosque on the other. Otherwise it's kind of just a grey box that says National Stadium on it if you look very carefully. So we were always aware that we were going to have to do a little bit of work on that.
So that range of work that they do, that they present, things that they present, was an opportunity in terms of new audiences, but it was a real challenge in terms of getting your existing audience back. I mean, gosh, you did Riot 2016, 2017, 2019.
Yeah.
But then there was this huge blank period. How did you get your audience to come back to you? Because you clearly did, because you had to put on extras, open up 100 extra seats a night because you were selling so many tickets.
And they sold straight away, and we could have sold more. We were, you know, there was a point where we put 100 extra on or 240 extra on, and then we're like, ah no, speaker fills and faff in front of house, and you know, we'll never do it. So we left it at the 100. So kept everyone hanging on for more. But I think, you know, going into, you know, selling 10 shows in a boxing stadium after the pandemic would have been was massively daunting. It was the biggest thing I've ever done personally by a million miles. But we did have just that kind of bank of knowledge from having done Riot 3 times. You know, we premiered Riot as a total unknown quantity in the Fringe Festival in 2016. That after the first preview of that, the entire run sold out by word of mouth. We had really strong sales patterns and data from that. We brought it back for 10 shows in Vicar Street in 2017 and 6 shows in Vicar Street in 2019. So we knew a lot about the kind of, like, what was an efficient and effective campaign for that, what had worked for our audiences. There was also just a huge level of demand for Riot to bring it back, especially post-pandemic, when people were looking for big, joy, emotive, cathartic things, and you're like, okay, we've kind of been working on something like this anyway. Wake had been in the works in 2018 anyway, and then we were like, okay, well, now we're going to definitely do that, but make it even more about joy and catharsis and togetherness. So we knew we had that audience, we knew the kind of
But
mix we needed for it.
The trouble is though, we'd all been absent for 2.5 years. I mean, and invisible. You did some very specific things to grab their attention, didn't you?
Yeah, it's been a busy year, so we warmed up with 5 shows in project in March, and then had 13 shows of Party Scene, which is a contemporary dance and theatre show in June. So we had kind of warmed up our audience and quite different facets of our audience throughout the year, but crossover audiences. So we had kind of reawakened our website activity and our mailing list and our social and stuff in the middle there. But we had a huge focus on, and this is a kind of a strategy that we use in most of our campaigns, is focusing on the on sale date in particular, and aiming for that first day of sales to be the biggest day of sales. And it was by a huge long way, and that involves focusing really keenly on the messaging and the collateral that goes out in the first instance, but particularly on the mailing list and what happens when. So we announced Wake as an early announce for the Fringe Festival at the start of July, and I know it was the 30th or we announced on the 29th of June because Party Scene was just finishing and we didn't want to have tickets on sale for both at the same time. So we announced, and this is a strategy that works for us quite often, is announcing the show with a few days in advance of the on sale. So we announced that this is going to happen and it's going to go on sale on Friday, and here is a pre-sale list for you to sign up to. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
A little bit, maybe, use the mic, sorry, it's just that.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay. So what we had done was we made a specific email sign-up list for people who wanted to get first access to the tickets. And that is something that we do very regularly. It really focuses the messaging on this is happening, get the word out, get your gang together, tickets are going to go on sale on Friday, and if it's anything like the things that we've done earlier on in the year, they're going to sell out. So it really mobilises people, it gets the word of mouth out in advance, it gets everyone teed up, and kind of really helps to create a big splash.
So that sign-up thing of getting as many people as possible who've experienced your work to sign up for the mailing list is really, really important.
Yeah, and this wasn't even our mailing list. This is if you're on our mailing list already, you are joining the list for the pre-sale link to get advance access for 2 hours on the Friday before they
2
go on general
hours, so
sale.
you're really channeling that word of mouth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
so we had about 500 people, 600 people sign up for that. And then we went on sale on the Friday, and we had a very successful campaign, over the whatever it was, 2.5 months we sold 7,000 tickets, but and we had very high box office targets, but we hit 25% of that target in that first weekend.
Ooh. So building buzz, building excitement, making a launch of an event a really exciting thing to do. I mean, I loved all your teasers, your video teasers and things like that.
Yeah.
It was really cool.
Yeah. And then it just means that for the rest of the campaign, you've got a really strong indication of where you're at and what's working, and you know how much work you have to do over the remainder of the campaign. So you can, maybe move around where you were going to spend things or what language you're going to use. You're like, actually, I don't need to do that anymore. Those people are covered, and then you can be a little bit more kind of responsive.
Yeah, so really flexible and responsive. Okay. I mean, did they behave like you expected them to?
Almost. So from Riot we had a load of great data. We sold different tiered ticket prices for Riot. In Vicar Street we had ringside seats, stall seats, and then we usually had an accessible price kind of balcony or a stall seat as well. And we wanted to emulate that for Wake, both in terms of experience and accessibility. In the stadium there are those, like in this instance, literally boxing ring ringside seats, and those are a higher price point. But the second and third rows behind that are almost as good. So kind of having that spread across price points, so it gets different ages, different backgrounds. And what we had, the knowledge we had from Riot was that actually the most expensive seats and the cheapest seats were always the first ones to sell out. So our meticulous box office projection and target and everything was based on that kind of pattern. It didn't entirely hold through, and a lot of them sold straight away. But this year, we definitely saw like a little bit more kind of price sensitivity and audience hesitancy around those things. So we then moved to specific targeting for the ringside seats, because those are people who have higher disposable income and also know that if you sit in those seats, panty might sit on your knee or something like that might happen. So it's like, it's a certain people who really want to be in the thick of things, but then, you know, our €15 ticket, that's people who want to be there even if they have to maybe stand. That's not the case in the National Stadium, you know, but we wanted to keep that spread, but also really tracked what tickets we're selling when and in response to what.
Audiences are telling me that they're no longer seeing our social media because they haven't engaged with us for 2.5 years. Did you do a lot of paid social media?
For like, it's like paid social media is always a part of my campaigns anyway, except for the pandemic ones where there was only 12 tickets to go on sale anyway, so they just kind of looked after themselves. But yeah, I think just to get above the fold, and because, you know, if you have knowledge of the kind of people who are coming to your shows, I always quite particularly target interest groups. Ours is a crossover audience, it's an arts audience, it's a club audience, it's a queer audience. So there are specific interests and festivals and programs that you can target, you know, to really hit those. So we're hitting the people who are seeing us anyway, but then their friends and people like them, you know. So and like it was also just lucky the spread of events we'd had throughout the year. Shit was an all-woman cast performing a very rude, very harsh Australian play. Party Scene was like a dance and contemporary theatre audience, and an almost entirely male audience. It was like 89% male views on those ads and everything, which is obviously nearly the flip of what you'd normally see for arts audiences. So we had hit a lot of people. We had a lot of website activity throughout the year, which we could use for retargeting, and then seeing what worked and what didn't with A/B testing as well. So we did do paid, but it was, you know, it's quite efficient paid stuff. You know, a lot of the time we'd see maybe like 9 cents for a click through, up to 37%, not much more than that. And then just seeing what collateral worked for that. You know, for a Party Scene, we had, you know, really on the line sexualized imagery, which, you know, it's a funny thing for social. You have to be quite careful. This is Pop Baby. I've got quite clever around that stuff. We've had shows called Sure Look It, Fuck It, Shit, Conversations After Sex, and a show about chemsex in the last 3 years. So the algorithm does not like us. But you kind of figure out, you know, the targets and things that you can use around that. Anyway, for Wake also, we didn't do as much paid for Party Scene. Again, it was a shorter run, but I did target particular interest groups for Wake as well. We knew we were targeting a very particular postcode around the venue.
D8.
And it's also, again, we don't have huge access to our own customer data because we're almost always selling through third-party festivals and venues, but we kind of anecdotally and from other festivals we worked on, we know a lot of the arts audiences are living in Dublin 7 and Dublin 8 and Dublin 12. But we did actually try some new stuff on social this year. We advertised on Grindr for the first time, and that worked. It's not for everyone, but it paid off.
So
Wake.
about the opportunities for new audiences that the venue and D8 provided, how did you get in front of them? I mean, the mailing list has been, your emailing list has been really, really important for your existing audiences, but this brand new audience post-pandemic, what did you do?
Well, we targeted them very specifically on social media, and then for Wake we also literally put flyers in their doors, which was a late campaign decision when we were doing well, example, felt like there were people we weren't getting to. So we, you know, like print and flyers and stuff was always so complicated because it's just money in a bin a lot of the time, I think, because you never see it again, you can't track it. But, you know, we were like, hang on, we're just going to get a map out around the venue, and we, you know, designed particular collateral and language around the show, but also around it being really close by. So I think the tagline was a great night out with a short walk home. So it was just like, you know, hello, we're around the corner, please come. And that, again, like I have no real solid way of tracking that, but the anecdotal evidence that we have from Leonard's Corner, Clanbrassil House, Bastable, and Galway Grey, which are the like restaurants around the corner, they all thanked us for being around. So it definitely kind of fed into the
And you did those city centre screens as well, didn't you?
Yes, yeah, no, like I think for a campaign that's this big and with this many tickets to sell, like social is never going to be enough, even if it's really great paid social. Like a lot of like if I'm doing a show and a project for a short run, paid social will often do the job, but you know, something that big and something where we're trying to make a big splash, you kind of do need to get that out of home in there. That has become harder in Dublin because the IPA poster sites are now gone. No one has kind of really stepped into that. I love those, they're fab. There's kind of no, you know, substitute for just like seeing something on your walk to work every day. So we did use the digital micromedia screens, which are in like very specific places around town, and used those as well. We tried our hands at getting other things, didn't really work all that much. We some of our friends in places with big windows put up posters for us, like Panty Bar has a lovely big poster slot, different cafes, particularly around Dublin 8, Dublin 12. But, you know, again, we're kind of, like, didn't have a massive budget, so it had to be.
You really didn't have a massive
yeah,
budget.
so
I was astonished that they did what they did with the size of budget that you had. Yeah. I love this. So you've got this really integrated campaign that's online and offline. You've got a really clear idea of what your audience is. You're tracking it like on a daily basis, yeah? So sales on a daily basis, and then you're
if not
adapting.
hourly basis.
If not
The
hourly.
refreshing on Ticketall was like ridiculous. But yeah, no, we do, you know, we have the graphs of cash sales and ticket sales per day, and we had those from Baker Street 2 years ago as well. So we had mapped a projection as to what we thought might work, and then we mapped it against the actual as well.
So it's all resources that we've got, we can do this. But then you're being really flexible about how you respond to it on a pretty much daily basis. You know, what's working, what's not working, what's the gap, where do we need to put what we're doing. And I mean, I was really excited when I interviewed Philly and Jenny at one of the Theatre Forum concerts. Was it conferences in Cork? Was it Cork?
It was
Wexford. My God, they've got their finger in the marketing pie, haven't they?
Yeah, no, it's a in full company obsession. There's absolutely no director. Like they were directing the show. They're co-directing a 14-person massive cabaret thing. So they were obviously very much in the room with that circus. But like everyone is thinking about it and thinking about what connections we can all leverage all the time. Because you know, like it is like, oh, they have a pub and they have a window and a poster, you know, that kind of stuff, which is
that's the
social.
kind of marketing we used to do, isn't it? Because well, I thought, yeah, oh, brilliant.
Well, it is cheap, and like when all of the posters like they're literally taken down, it's, you know.
You gotta do something.
And like, you know, with the National Stadium, it's on South Circular Road, but there was no place on it that we could put a poster really without like infringing DCC guidelines because it's street facing. We tried a few things, but didn't quite get there this time. Like we had, like for Vicar Street in 2017, we had like dropped a poster of Panty the size of the building down the side of it on a cherry picker. We didn't have that budget this time. but if you're doing something like that and somebody complains, you have 28 days to take it down.
Oh. Is there a fine as well? You just have 28
Take
days.
it down,
28 days to take it down. That's grand.
which might be just
Lucy,
after the show.
you've done, thank you, you're so lovely. You've done some crunching of data, haven't you? What did you find out about Wake and its impact?
Yeah, please tell me.
I thought Heather was going to pull me up there for breaking poster law. Not this conversation. So just a quick thank you to our friends at Dublin Fringe Festival. I was in contact, and myself and Connor were in contact with Dee and Connor during the week just to see if there was any insights that we might be able to pull. So thank you to them for their permission. So just, I suppose, some top level analysis was that anyone who purchased a ticket for Wake, we can look at what we did was we ran just a report to see were there any trends where they might have dipped into other elements of the Fringe Fest after their purchase or after their attendance at Wake, and it seems that this year they had a really great result where the majority actually of audience members attended more than one event at Dublin Fringe Festival. So one of those events that they would have attended would definitely have been Wake. Actually, the higher percentage of audience members attended around 3 shows, but there were various segments of audience members who attended much more than 3 shows, or 3 different events throughout the entire festival. I would imagine, in terms of their kind of benchmarking for event attendance per festival was very, very high.
Yeah, can I just put that into context? The last data we have is 2016 with the Theatre Forum benchmarking. 63% of people who bought a ticket bought for one event only, and for festivals that went up to 3/4 were only buying for one event during the whole festival. So that is amazing. That is a huge shift in behaviour.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I'd say I would like to think that Fringe Festival are somewhere celebrating the success of the festival as they wrap up now.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. So Wake has changed the behaviour of audiences at the Fringe. Wow, that's super.
I suppose maybe just another thing, note that we had as well, and when we take these top level stats, we just, we take them with a pinch of salt either way. There will be a margin there as well that we'll be keeping a close eye on. So that's why I haven't gone into too many stats, of course, but something that we have, I suppose, identified, and we can look into it further with their team, is that it looks like a large proportion of their audiences this year who did purchase a ticket for Dublin Fringe Festival had attended the festival for the first time. So either the first time in their lifespan, but what we would like to say on that is the first time that since probably around 2016. And the reason that we say that is just because there's a chance that the data might have been captured prior to 2016. We also have COVID in there as well. But the data would lead us to assume that a lot of the audiences who were attending Fringe Festival were first-time audience members. So really interesting to see that who is returning at the moment. They're keen to buy or to attend quite a lot.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Questions for Carla?
I'm just curious about the kind of pre-planning for marketing and for the audiences that you want to push towards, like how far in advance that happens before that pre-sale happens.
As soon as you know where the show is going to happen, and what all of the on sale date is part of the marketing plan as well. I was like, excuse me, I have 10 shows in project that I want to sell out. Please, can we not go on sale until those are over? But then the lead in time for Fringe were really flexible in allowing us to do our own pre-sale sign-up list for our own show. They announced a few other shows at the same time. So it's a little bit of a piece of string thing, but like we'll be thinking about from the absolute get-go, like choosing the venue, choosing the festival, and the timing is all part of the marketing campaign. So it's like who is going to be in that venue and who are more likely to be at that festival versus another one. But also it's most of it's just logistics as to when the festival is happening, when the festival can be announced, how long is too long for a marketing campaign, you know, like how much, you know, how long do you want to be knocking on people's doors about a show. So that's why the kind of on sale thing, you know, it was a slightly longer than usual fringe campaign, but you know, kind of getting straight out the gate with the big splash on the on sale day means you do kind of have that you know, knowledge as to what the rest of your campaign looks like then, whereas if you've only planned for, you know, a short sharp 6 weeks, and you know, you've like planned your weekly spend, and once that's gone, it's gone. So like a lot of it is just logistics. It's like that's when you have the funding and you have the cast and you have the people who can go in the photo shoot. Like, you know, our photo shoot was massive. It was done in May. We hadn't fully cast the show at that point, you know, so it's a bit of a balancing act kind of between all of those things. But we like audience are at the start of the development process, not even the rehearsal process or the marketing campaign. We're always thinking about who we're talking to.
I feel that though, sorry, the microphone.
I feel that though, for probably most people in this room, I'm not going to speak for you, but just my experience, most audiences don't purchase tickets until much closer to showtime. So the fact that you got basically a quarter done so far in advance, I think is like, one, fantastic, well done, and that's probably what people want to be happening, but it's not quite in the reality of, I would say, most venues. There's kind of a zeitgeist with This Is Pop Baby. So
yeah, no, it's something that we've fostered for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, that has grown over time. So I'm curious then, so you had your 25%, what then
Of the
was
target.
Yeah, of the target. What then were the practices happening after that? And even like you had said about doing the flyers, you know, when did that, was the show already running when that was happening?
Well, things like that, like we would have a week by week marketing campaign from the outset anyway, and at the very start it might be a sketch, just so you know what kind of materials that you need. You're like, okay, first week after an ounce is probably going to be quiet, and we'll probably just coast on that, you know, post doing what it is or whatever. And then, you know, after 2 weeks we might bring in the video, or then we'll start to introduce the cast, and you know, then we'll be in rehearsals and we'll do this, and you know, blah blah blah. But just so you kind of have a map out, even if as things change or move in sales, that you move them around, but you do have an idea of where you want to go and what might be spent on things. We'll also have a list of like SOS, emergency, what are we going to do, tactics, which you'll think of at the start of a campaign in the hopes that you'll never have to use them. You know, if you have, you know, slow shows, or if you need to look at groups, or if you need to, you know, whatever you need to do, but just to think of them in advance. Like the flyers thing, if the show was already up, that would have been way too late because we coincided with Garth Brooks. So every single printing company in the whole country was printing cowboys and whatever the hell else was going on, which we found when we were printing our merchandise the week before. But no, that was a kind of, we're doing well, we could probably do better. We don't know if we've tapped into this actual immediate neighborhood thing yet.
Yeah.
So, and then we were like, we have the bit of room, you know, because it's not just printing flyers, it's also bodies to put them into letterboxes, because otherwise Dublin City Council will fine you for dumping if you haven't, you know, they need to go into people's doors and into houses. So that was a little bit of, we're feeling confident, we've had this great start, we can do more, the festival will start soon, there'll be so many other options of things going on. 400,000 people are going to go to Garth Brooks. We don't know if any of them are going to come to our show, but you know, that kind of thing.
Sorry for the Garth Brooks and the queer audience of club culture.
At least one person went to both. I can't vouch for anyone else.
I wanted to go to Pop Baby, but I did go to Garth.
Just a quick one. Say, if you sold 150, 160 grand worth of tickets, would you be willing to share what percentage of that went on marketing, and how that panned out between traditional and digital?
Oh, I don't think I have that sum in my head. It like normally, like I think the old chestnut is 10%. So it was maybe around that, maybe 10, 15. But I actually don't know off the top of my head. It was, because we couldn't, while we were building our budget on a very high capacity percentage, there was no guarantee that we had that. So, and then everything else has quintupled in price. So it was quite lean, but I don't think it was more than that. But I'm sorry, it's not actually a real figure that I have in my head. And a lot of that would have been on the manager and the actual team.
So you had the people in place to actually do it.
Yeah.
Cool.
And a lot of WhatsApp
Wow,
groups.
Carla, that's amazing. Can we talk to you afterwards? Can we all come and ask you mad questions?
Sure.
Afterwards. Brilliant, superb. Because let's move boxes. The PowerPoint's disappeared. Let us talk about new audiences for a different kind of approach. New audiences for maybe new activities, but also the same activities from a completely different angle. So Katie's
somebody needs to sign into this.
I know, it's
Oh, hang on. No, they don't.
oh good.
Hang on.
I might sit there just so I can watch.
Okay. So, see if I can get this to work. Now, I'm going to have to whiz you through this because we've got a hard stop. I'm aware time is of the essence, so I'm going to whiz you through this as quick as I can. But these slides are available to download from my website, our website, if you would like them, and if you miss anything as I whiz through it. So, I'm going to whiz through. Basically, what we did was, with all the work that we did on understanding audiences and their sentiment during COVID, we kind of repurposed that approach that we'd done and went, actually, the next crisis, or so we thought, the next crisis was the climate emergency. And we kind of went, okay, could we use a similar approach here to get lots of organisations to send out the same questions to their audiences so that we can start to understand how audiences are feeling about the climate emergency? And one of the things that prompted me to do that was because, similar to COVID, I could see lots of organisations kind of running around trying to put together plans, huge plans to tackle this stuff, in the absence of any customer sentiment data. Understandably putting their environmental sustainability plans together, but nobody seemed to have any idea of what audiences were thinking about this. So we thought it was important to do this. It's very much a baseline piece of work. There's loads more to be done. It's not going to answer every question, but hopefully it just sets the scene, starts to give us indications of the ways we might start to think about some of this stuff, and how we might bring those audience voices into our planning. So at the moment, the data I'm going to show you is what we did in the UK, but we'll talk later about what we might do in Ireland. Hopefully this is going to be useful, because that's me, you don't need to know that. So this is just when we did it. So we did it in May. We had 100 organisations sign up, but 58 actually sent it out. Don't need to know where they were. 12,000 responses. Sort of typical age profile, really. And they're a frequent theatre-going audience. Okay, so all that stuff is there. And they came to a wide range of art forms. So it's not a niche audience that we're talking about. It's a general, cultural, frequent audience, your core attenders. Okay. So the first thing we wanted to know is how concerned cultural audiences are about the climate emergency when compared with the population as a whole. So what we did in the UK is we shamelessly stole some questions that are used in a public attitude survey by the Office of National Statistics, and we asked cultural attenders the same questions, because then we could go, well, that's what the population think, that's what cultural attenders think. So we would need to find something similar in Ireland if we were going to do that here. But basically, this is how worried people are about the impact of climate change. So 86% of cultural attenders are worried or somewhat worried about climate change, compared with 76% of the population at large. So cultural attenders are more worried about this.
And more extremely worried.
And more extremely worried. And there was a bit of variation by age, not as much as we expected to see, but there will be some more variations by age later on. So, yeah, bit of variation there. Under 35's the most worried, but not as much difference as I would have thought. Okay, so let's look at these people who were not at all worried, somewhat unworried, or neither worried or unworried. These aren't my questions, these are the Office of National, neither worried or unworried. Anyway, not my questions. So these 14%, why aren't they worried? So the biggest reason is that they think there's more urgent priorities to be worried about, which I can understand that, why people would say that, but it's an interesting thing. It's not because they feel ill-informed about climate change compared with the population. So essentially the population in the UK who were saying they weren't worried about it, there were a lot of them saying, 35% of them is because they don't really understand it, they don't really know much about it. But cultural audiences aren't saying that. They're kind of like, well, I do know about it, but there's more urgent things to worry about. Okay, so to what extent have you made changes to your lifestyle? So again, our Act Green respondents, 21% of them have made lots of changes. 73% have made some changes, so 21% compared with 10% of the population. Those who haven't made any changes, why have they not? There's only 6% of them, but why have they not made any changes? And the top two are that their individual acts are not going to have any effect. They think that, that it's up to large polluters should change before individuals. So everything I do isn't going to make any difference. And I think these are really key things to think about when it comes to our messaging later on. Secondly, so that's what they think about climate change, so that's good. Cultural audience is obviously much more engaged, much more worried, taking more action. What do they think the role of cultural organisations is, or should be? Now, I have to admit to being a bit sceptical about this, and I got a lot of pushback from organisations saying, oh, well, if you ask them, what if they say they don't care? What if they say they don't want us to be doing this? What should we do? And I was like, well, it'd be better to know, wouldn't it, what they think? And I honestly expected to find a bit of a polarisation, especially in the UK. I expected to find some real climate change deniers who were just like, well, cultural organisations, what have they got to do with the climate? Nothing to do with them, sort of thing. And we didn't really see that because we put out this quite bold statement, and this was our statement that we worked on with Paddy at the Green Book, actually. Cultural organisations have a responsibility to influence society to make radical change to address the climate emergency. We beefed this up. We had something a bit more wishy-washy than this, and Paddy, who runs something called the Theatre Green Book, went, no, it's got to be a bit more punchy than that. So we did. And 77% of people from Act Green agree with that. Under 35's 86%. We're using words like radical change, and they think that cultural organisations have a role to play. So what I take from this is they actually want cultural organisations to be bold on this stuff. So how much importance do they think cultural organisations place on this at the moment? Well, not too bad. Organisations generally, where are we there? So 74% saying they think that they place some importance on it. But then, because it was sent out by individual organisations, we asked them to think about the specific organisation that sent them the survey, and they were less confident about saying that they thought it was important. So in general, they think the sector is doing it, but when they're actually thinking about the individual organisation, they were sort of a bit less.
Yeah. And it's because they don't know.
They don't know. Yeah, and there's a reason why they don't know, which I'm going to show you in a minute. So then we wanted to see what, because there's so many sustainability initiatives, I bet they're coming out of your ears, and you're probably thinking, we can always do more, we can always do more. What are the initiatives that your audience expect you to do? So this is where we use something called the Theatre Green Book, which I'm sure Anna can tell you more about, but it's basically 3 volumes of it, which are kind of guidelines for what you should do as a cultural organisation in each of these 3 areas to move towards a sustainable approach. And there's lots of detail in there, one about how you produce work, one about your buildings, and the other about your operations. And so what we did is we took the areas that the Theatre Green Book is suggesting cultural organisations should be doing, and tested to what extent audiences thought they were important. So which of these would you expect a cultural organisation to be doing? Now, we've got a whole list of them which is in the research, but I've just pulled out the top ones. 90% of them expect you to be using recycled sources, materials from reused or recycled sources for your productions, and ensuring that sets and materials are reused. Interestingly, 2/3 of them felt that you should be seeking funding or financial support from ethical sources. And that is even higher for under 35s. 71% of them said you should be looking at ethical sources. Interestingly, the subject of climate change through creative output, 52% of under 35s think you should be doing that. And that's what plays a little bit into our audience development matrix, because they're the group that we want to get post-COVID, aren't they? They're the audiences of the future. And 52% of them are saying they expect cultural organisations to be tackling the subject of climate change through the creative output on stage. And running specific programmes and events to explore the subject more deeply. The plus 7% just means that's 7% higher than the average for all respondents. And then managing buildings, energy efficient, yeah, I think we're all going to have that forced on us, aren't we? And recycling, reducing waste, that's what they expect you to do. But with under 35s, they also were really strong on supporting biodiversity and using energy from renewable sources. And then on operations, all the usual stuff, I suppose, minimising food waste, disposable packaging, etc., paper, digital tickets and stuff. Increasing the availability of plant-based options, very strong, much higher with the under 35s. Website sustainability, I doubt many of the over 55s would even know that was an issue, because I didn't. And sharing their sustainability policy with audiences is something that, again, the under 35s really want to see. Okay, so if that's what they expect the organisations to do, what part are audiences willing to play in all of that? Because it's all very well, isn't it, saying do all of this, but what are they willing to do, and what would they be most likely to be nudged towards? So how likely would you be to get involved in any of the following if they did them? And the things that they were most interested in were being open to suggestions of more sustainable food choices at the venue, using public transport in order to access a reduced ticket price. So there's lots of things in there that they say they would do. It'd be interesting to see if they do, and they're all much higher for under 35s. Urban versus rural, unsurprisingly, the urban audiences were more likely to say they would use public transport, and the rural audiences were more likely to say they would use a car sharing scheme, but they said they would. Carbon offsetting a little bit, yeah. And then how likely would you be to give money to support a fundraising campaign to enable these things? And interestingly, it's the biodiversity one that they would be most likely to give to. So there's a real sort of mismatch here between what they're expecting you to do in terms of running your buildings and the things that they might actually give you money to do, and what they're prepared to do. So it is quite a complex picture, but hopefully it starts to give us a bit of a steer. And again, big difference in the under 35s, again, much more strongly aligned with this stuff. And it's interesting, I think, for me, because we've always assumed, I think, as a sector, that the people who give money to things are the older people and the more frequent people and the more engaged people. And what this is suggesting is that there are certain things that young people are more likely to give to than older people if you get the messaging right. Now, cost of living and energy and all the rest of it aside, but I think there's something in the water here that we should be thinking about in terms of audience development. Sorry, I'm racing through this because I know we're short of time. So getting on to philanthropy, again, assumption from me was there will be a bunch of highly engaged old people who give money to organisations, a small proportion of them with probably a disproportionate amount of influence on those organisations because of the money that they give them, who may well sway the board and the executive in terms of, and who may well be climate change, skeptics or whatever, because they're older and probably conservative in the case of Britain. So I was like, I wonder whether the kind of donors and supporters, if you put them in that bracket, are just going to be a bit more sceptical about this stuff and they're going to trip us up. That's absolutely not the case. 62% of these respondents had made donations and 42 were regular supporters, 42% regular supporters. And when we compared supporters and donors with those who hadn't supported, those who had donated were more worried about climate change than those who hadn't, and more likely to say that cultural organisations have a responsibility to influence society. So the kind of excuses that I expected boards and organisations to come up with as to why they can't do it, oh well, our donors would never support, rubbish, okay? So they absolutely want organisations to do this, even those who are donating money at the moment. And funnily enough, they'd be, so people who've supported in the past are more likely to say they would support in the future. No shit. So my 3 takeaways from this are, firstly, audiences want you to do it. They're more concerned, they've made more changes than the general population, and 90% agree that you should influence, you have a role to play. Those who are less concerned think what they do won't make any difference, or it means compromising on quality, the kind of sackcloth and ashes approach. And actually, these are key messaging points, I think. And even though they're a small proportion of the audience, I think messaging things about every little thing that you do is helping us do this, and quantifying some of that, and making the choices good choices and attractive choices rather than, oh well, I know it's a bit shit, but we're doing it for the environment kind of stuff. Secondly, communication challenges. Audiences at the moment don't know where you stand. It's clear from those slides we saw earlier. 25% didn't know what you did, and of 100 organisations who signed up to do this survey, 95 of them didn't have anything about environmental sustainability on their homepage. Only 5 of them did. Big challenge here is, what on earth do you talk about? There's so much that you're already doing, want to be doing. Where do you start? How long's a piece of string? So what are we going to talk about? Well, here's a kind of clue. We could start to use some of this research to go, well, let's put together what audiences expected of us and what's most important to them. And immediately we can see 3 things up there that are important to them and they expect us to do. So that, and I'm not suggesting that you all go and talk about these 3 things, but you can see how if we have this research, we can start to go, oh, okay, so let's talk about those things because we know they chime with what audiences want. Similarly, you might think about having a hero project, something you want to be known for that makes you stand out as an organisation. Home in Manchester have got beehives on the roof. Not going to change the world, but everybody knows they've got beehives on the roof. It's like, oh yeah, there was beehives on the roof. Chichester Festival Theatre are doing carbon offsetting and have planted thousands of trees from their audience's giving, and they're known for that. You can't do everything, but maybe pick some, and it's not necessarily, I don't mean virtue signalling, I mean being known for something that you're doing so that people, oh, they're the theatre doing that, okay? Where are you going to talk about it? So again, putting this bit together, what people expect of you, what's most important to them, these things. When you talk about using paperless or digital tickets, you talk about that at the point you're issuing the tickets. It's obvious. Avoiding disposable packaging and single-use plastic at the point where that's happening. I mean, things like, I work with Baltic in Gateshead, and they just have little stickers on hand dryers, just sort of saying, thanks for doing your bit and all this kind of stuff. Where are you going to talk about it? How are you going to do it? Is it lots of detail? Is it a quick reminder, a sticker on hand dryer? Or is it perhaps a video of people backstage explaining how you're recycling the sets that you're using or whatever it is? So think about the level of detail and also quantifying things so that we start addressing head on. If every member of our audience did this, this is the effect we collectively could have, rather than, oh, nothing I do is going to make any difference. And to use positive language. And here's an example of that. When we ask people which of the options is most important to you, only 3% of people said plant-based options. But when we said, how likely would you be to use this, 72% of people said being open to suggestions of more sustainable food choices. It's the same thing, probably, right? But it's how you talk about it and putting really positive language behind it. So that's my whistle-stop run through it all. And I suppose the question is, is that useful to you? Is it something you'd like to do? Should we be doing something in Ireland? And if so, we can work together to make that happen.
Can I just preempt any of your questions, just to say that we're looking closely at the Act Green survey for probably sometime next year, because we appreciate that top of mind at the moment for everybody is the increased energy costs and utility costs that are coming over this winter, and also trying to figure out what subsidies are going to come through from government. So we don't think it's a particularly good time to survey audiences right at this point in time, but the idea of synchronising the survey in maybe May of next year, when it might provide more useful information. But we'll be working with Katrina Fallon on the Green Venues project. There's a greener touring project ongoing as well, and this is the audience piece of that work, and we hope to bring that to your attention and have more conversations with you about all of those components over the coming few months. But
what it made me think about though is how this is signalling to me how we talk about our
new
energy
audiences.
saving. You know, how do we talk about our energy saving measures that we're going to have to be taking over the next few months? Some really big signals there, isn't it? So we can actually make it a positive, not just a negative.
But I think at the moment the landscape here of energy, it's a very complex and fraught one just right at this moment in time, and we're not necessarily seeing the pathway out of that yet. But I think this becomes very relevant once we're beyond the current difficulties. And we're hoping that we can encourage all of you to stay for the AGM, which is coming up next, but we will induce you to stay with coffee, and there are more Silk Road coffee, tea and biscuits and things on outside, and you're more than welcome to bring coffees and teas back into this room if you want. But again, thank you so much to you both, but most particularly the wake phenomenon, the phenomenon that has become wake, I think just hands a round of applause. But thank you everybody, and as I said, see you back in a few minutes if you can stay.
If anyone is attending the AGM, if they could come out to us to come off the list,